Hello, my name is Sanjay Mehta, Portfolio Manager for Learning at Cisco's newest and highest level of certification, the Cisco Certified Architect. Joining me today are Alvaro Retana and Khalid Raza, our newest Cisco Certified Architect certification holders. Both recently just sat and passed the recent board exam back on February 17th. And first I want to congratulate both of you on achieving this new milestone in your career. And also want to thank you for joining us today to share your thoughts and perspective, not only on the certification, but also on the process itself. So before we get started, can we start with education and technical work experience that each of you experienced? And Alvaro, do you want to start?
Sure, definitely. Thanks, Sanjay. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Costa Rica. That's where I'm from. That's where I started working in communications at a small ISP there called REXA. And now I've been with Cisco for 15 years. The last 11 have been in CDO, in the Central Development Organization, where what I do is protocol architecture, mostly routing protocols, a little bit of security, mobile devices, things along those lines.
Okay. Khalid, you want to provide some background information regarding your work experience and education?
First, let me start by saying thank you, Sanjay, for the opportunity. Yeah, I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering as well from a university in Pakistan. Then I did my master's here in Wichita State University. My experience with Cisco has been for 17 years now. I've been working with the routing protocol teams in TAC, then did a tour of ISP team. Alvaro and I worked together in that team for a couple of years. My current job, I do a lot of work with large enterprise accounts for the ECATs and SPs as well because of my legacy work with SPs. And my interest is very similar to Alvaro's in the routing area. And recently I started to focus on this interesting technology on virtualization. That's my current interest along with IP version 6.
Great. Can we elaborate a little bit further on the design and architectural background and experience? So let's start with you, Alvaro.
Sure. For me, it really started back when I was working in Costa Rica. At that time, it was the early 90s, and the internet was just starting to take off. And I was lucky enough to be in a place where a small team of us, it was maybe 3 or 4, that went through the whole process of creating a business case, a business strategy, the network design, and actually configuring the equipment at the end for an internet service in Costa Rica. It was actually the first in the country and the first in the region. So that gave me a really good experience, I think, or a really good outlook at least, on the whole process, the business side, the technical side, everything else. At Cisco, as Khalid said, I worked in the ISP team for a little bit with some of the big service providers, mid to late 90s, when many of them were growing, many of them were changing the networks, adapting to new demands, more critical infrastructure. And over the last 10 or 11 years, I've been working as a technology architect. What that means is I work on mostly routing protocols, on design of solutions that eventually customers are going to use, hopefully 5 or 10 years down the road. Even though my main focus is not on working with customers, I still need to work on understanding where the business models are going, where the technical needs are, so that we can design those solutions for them to use 5 or 10 years down the road.
Great. Khalid, a little background on your architectural design side?
So my exposure to the design and architecture came through the ISP team. It was very different in the early 90s when we were also, along our customers, learning the intricacies of these technologies that are never been deployed at that larger scale. So I used to support MCI at that time, along with Unet, 2 of the largest carriers of that time. It was very interactive work with those guys. And ISPs, if you had worked with ISPs in those days, those guys always had a chip on their shoulder. You had to be at their level of understanding of the protocols before they would interact with you, because their interaction mostly were with the high-end Cisco development IETF guys. So you had to earn their respect. And for you to earn that respect, you had to spend time learning protocols in depth. So once you start to understand and learn those protocols in depth, you start to get a feel for the level of architecture work that goes on in the development of these protocols. As Alvaro mentioned what he's doing today, I take a lot of the work he does in the early stages and take the story to the customers. and directly interface with the customer. So my interaction with these guys helps me grow further on the side of deploying those protocols that he's working on the development pieces of it. But the depth of understanding that I developed in the early days of working with some of the largest carrier really goes a long way. And then venturing into the enterprise side, it's very interesting that a lot of work that goes inside of IETF, a lot of times people miss out the subtle differences that is between an enterprise architecture and a service provider architecture. And a lot of people who are within Cisco who come from both backgrounds get a very interesting take on the subtleties that you need to understand between the two network design and architectures. And I think that's where I got a lot of experience and exposure by, in fact, working with large carriers and large enterprise, and then interfacing and interacting with a lot of protocol development guys. And that helped a lot in understanding and creating new designs and architectures.
Great, great. Now, I know both of you are also CCIE and CCDE holders, and obviously you have the architect certification. What led you to pursue the Cisco Certified Architect certification, but also your other expert level certifications?
For me, it's always been more small personal goals, more than the bigger certification part, but more of a little goal for me to push myself. When I first came to Cisco, my boss actually told me, why don't you take the CCIE test to see where you are, just so that you can get a feel. And I took it and I passed it. And I thought it was a great exam for the time, for what I was doing at the time in the TAC, troubleshooting, etc. And now, as time has passed and my job has changed, then that was when the CCDE came along. And so it was another milestone, another personal challenge for me. And the same here for the CCAR. Just to sort of validate to myself that I can still learn and that I'm still up to date with the things that are going on.
Great, great. Khalid?
So CCIE for me was a career thing. I was a fresh graduate out of college, joined the TAC. So when you're working with the best of the best, TAC always had the top talent at the time I was working at. To be counted among the top guys. And CCIE was an industry recognition certification level that you are seen as somebody who actually understands depth of putting a network together. Then, as Alvaro mentioned, it's an evolution process. As my job evolved out of day-to-day TAC work, troubleshooting work, you need a little more design validation. So with CCDE is something that you say, okay, I understand as my job has evolved, I understand design. I understand what my customers are doing today, how they're deploying and designing their networks. Cisco Certified Architect, I always say, does not require any study. It requires experience.
Sure.
And for me, was the validation of that exam. In fact, it was interesting. As I was writing my thesis work for the architecture exam and creating my presentation, there's so many things that you keep on thinking, oh, I've done this with that customer. Oh, that customer might see this very interesting. So that whole process of saying, this is validation of actual day-to-day work I do, it gives me the recognition that's required to say, okay, you are doing this work day in and day out. You're putting effort into this. Now you have a certification that actually says that you are considered by Cisco somebody who can go and build these architectures for customer.
Once you decided to pursue the Cisco Certified Architect certification, how did you go about preparing and studying for it, Alvaro?
Well, as Khalid said, the short answer is we didn't prepare.
Okay.
This is a certification based on experience, on your ability to apply the knowledge that you have to a specific situation that, in this case, the certification presents you with. And this is day in and day out what you do with customers. You come in, you talk about their network, you talk about where they're going with their business, and you then apply your technical knowledge to that. There's really no way to prepare for that except having the experience
Work
itself.
experience is important.
Right, so on one hand, yeah, we didn't prepare. On the other hand, we've been preparing for the last 15 years.
Sure.
And to me, that is the real value of the certification.
Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Khalid? Were there any other resources that you could have looked upon to maybe even, outside of the work experience?
No, actually, it's very well put. I think for me, as Alvaro said, I've prepared for this for 17 years at Cisco. I didn't have to sit down. Oh, the only thing that I had to sit down was to write my report and create my presentation. Understanding the mindset of the questions that are put out there, how to actually put them in the most concise way in my presentation, which I had to present to the executive leader who will review from the business aspect of it. The technology aspect of it was pretty easy because that's what I do for my job day in and day out. So it's a very interesting blend from that perspective, that some of it I didn't have to prepare at all. There were pieces in that exam that I had to think through, that if I am presenting this to a senior leader in a company, how would I approach this answer for a CIO or a CTO to look at it and says, yeah, what you're proposing to me is relevant. Because in my day in and day out work, I don't do any cost analysis and say, here's where your cost savings are not coming in the solution that is being put out there. And that's why I would like you to consider some of these options that will give you more efficient way of saving money by the problem that was given to me. So I would say 95% of the thing didn't require any work. 5% for somebody who, like me, who does day in and day out very hardcore technology work, did require some business reading that I had to do to come up with my final presentation for a business leader that I had to present.
Sure. Now, in regard to the format of the board exam, how does it tie into the relationship to your real work experience? I mean, I know we talked about that here a little bit. If we can go in a little bit more.
It is definitely very, very realistic.
Okay.
The same things that you would do with a customer, come in, do a presentation on what your thoughts are, where they are, where they're going, your understanding, your recommendations. Same type of scenario. Interaction, back and forth, some questions, same type of things. And of course, the other part that is very realistic is what customers always do. They give you a problem, you solve it, and then they say, oh, but we want to do this other thing. And now you have to think on your feet and provide a different answer. And that's the format of the exam. It's very, very realistic. I would say almost 95% of what happens in real life.
Anything else you wanted to add, Khalid?
Actually, that is very true from my experience as well. Some of the times you get people who are very rigid, and I appreciated that some guys were on the board. I know that they knew that my answer was right, but they were deliberately arguing on a point, which happens a lot in customer scenario. That part of the exam was to keeping your patience. You know that this guy on the other end who's sitting knows that my assessment is very accurate, and that there is unreasonable questioning at times that are asked, which is very similar to customer scenarios that we walk into. There is somebody who's read a white paper, and he questions something that is absolutely irrelevant to the solution or architecture you're proposing. And to Alvaro's point, it was that realistic that at times you have to bite your tongue and agree with the person and say, but here's the point that I'm trying to emphasize, that you have to look at from the other angle. That's why your network has inefficiencies. That's why your operations is having trouble. And that's a very realistic situation that we go through every day with our customers, that you have to satisfy the architects, then you have to satisfy the design guys, and then you have to sit down with the director of operations saying, this idea is great, but here's why it will hurt your operations. And along the chain, you will find one or two, at times, unreasonable individuals that you do have to satisfy. And I think it was very, very realistic from my experience.
Good, good. Now, let's talk about the board exam itself and what you experienced. So can each of you walk through the day of the board exam and the process that each of you experienced the day of? So,
right, so by the time we get there, we have already been given some materials, background on the company. Again, just like you would in a normal situation, you know what the company is about. Background as well on the problems that they're having or the direction that they want to take. And so we prepared a presentation. So we come in and we do a presentation for their board, for their executives, maybe technical people, and there's questions and answers. Usually, one of the interesting parts as well is that in the mix of the people that you're presenting to, there's not only the high-level CTO or CIO or something, but there's also potentially lower level people, like the director of operations, or someone who's day in and day out managing the equipment. So it is interesting because now you have to go up and down and be able to present the technical issues, the business issues, and be able to have all of them understand the point that you're trying to make. So once you make your presentation, there's questions and answers, and then the group here comes back and they tell you, well, now there's a change. Now we changed our strategy. Now we did something different. Now we're going in a different direction, and we have some time, a couple of hours, I believe, to go and redo, or hopefully not redo, but adapt our thinking and adapt our solution to now the new circumstances. And then we come back and do another short presentation about that, and more questions and answers, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, Khalid, how was your day, and you walk us through your process and what you experienced?
So I'd say for the first time in my 12, 13 years, I was nervous walking into the exam, because when I was writing the report, I was pretty satisfied with my report, but I wasn't sure is there any twist that I missed out, that there was an expectation. And the question and answer, the first discussion that I had to present my solution was very interesting, as they kept it at different level. And generally, at times, you don't interact with all the levels at the same time. So you have to, what was challenging for me over there was I had to be prepared to answer from a 100,000-foot view all of a sudden to a 50-foot view. And that swing at times I felt was disturbing my rhythm. But that was also challenging. That piece was challenging. And twist was interesting part of it, because you knew walking in that there will be a twist. But generally in customer situation, we are lucky that we don't get that disturbance of the rhythm. That when you're going out to present to a CTO or CIO, that's a very different mindset and skill set that is needed. But at times it does happen that we've had a couple of situations where you have that scenario where there is a director, technical director, and they have their principal engineer sitting in the room. And at a lot of times your engineers, as we know, are very disruptive in discussions when you're presenting to management. So I would say it has happened to me 2-3 times in my career. And the CCA, it happened quite regularly during the board exam. Is all of a sudden there's a very deep technical question, and somebody will say, yeah, but that's irrelevant. If somebody who's being the CIO said, that's irrelevant to me, to come down to my level and come up to my level and say, this is what is very relevant. Here's where my cost savings will come from. I don't care why you're moving some of these technology pieces from a particular network to the second network that I've acquired, but what is relevant to me is how I will achieve operational efficiencies in this network. So that swing during the exam, I found it a little challenging, but you had to adapt to it. So that way I think it has some very, very interesting and challenging pieces during the board exam. I was nervous.
In terms of value of the certification, did you find that your management team was supportive and encouraged you to pursue the Cisco Certified Architect certification?
Yes, definitely. They've been very supportive all through CCAR, CCD, et cetera. It is interesting in engineering. There aren't that many people who, for whatever reason, pursue the certifications. And so when they see a couple of us that want to do it, yes, they definitely offered a lot of support.
Great. Khalid?
Well, my management was very, very supportive. But I would say the interesting piece was there was always a subtle pressure. When I was talking to my boss, and I'm going to take CCA, without him saying anything, it was saying, you'll pass it. And you say, well, I'm not sure. I haven't received the problem statement yet.
Right.
So, again, that was the reason I was a little nervous, because you walk into this thing with 17, 18 years of experience. There's a very clear expectation that you've done architectures for some of the largest carriers. You've done design work for some of the largest enterprise customers for Cisco. So there is an expectation that you should be able to pass it. So that's why, as Alvaro said, you can't prepare for it. You're preparing for it every day. So I think my management gave me tremendous support, but the pressure was there.
What benefit does this certification bring to your organization and to you personally, Alvaro?
Yes, I think personally, deep, definitely satisfaction of of passing it. Sitting in front of a group of your peers and being able to satisfy their questions, to go through all the changes, the ups and downs, it is a great satisfaction, great personal satisfaction of knowing that the work that you've been doing for the last 10, 12, 15 years, it is now validated. That is of tremendous value to me personally. I think in my organization, because we do a slightly different type of job, it still gives us an edge, because now we have people in the organization that are not only focusing on protocols, but that we know are also focusing on networks. And the shift from the protocol design and how do I put the bits and how do the packet flows is very, very different from how do you actually design a network, and even from how you architect a network, and what is the business value of that protocol and those bits for someone at a CIO or a CTO level. So I think it gives the organization that extra edge of understanding at all levels.
Okay. Khalid, what benefits did it bring to your organization and to you personally?
So from an organizational point of view, Cisco Services future is tied to architectures. We are, as a company, we're saying it's not about just putting these boxes together. It's understanding how relevant these technologies are to your overall business. So architecture is a very key for our future as a services organization. So I see that as a huge benefit from organization point of view. And now, from personal point of view, you've always been seen as somebody who does architecture work for customers. Now Cisco, as a company, saying we validate that by giving you that certification, by having you go through the process of this whole board exam, written exam, and this whole from the point of view of saying, we now understand that you have the skill set that is needed by our organization to start interfacing with the top engineering talent of a company to the CIO, CTO level of a company, and here's your number that we validate that you have the capability to do it. That's a very satisfying feeling.
In terms of the CCIE and CCDE certifications and all, comparing it to the Cisco Certified Architect certification, can you do a little compare and contrast between both?
Sure. I think very clearly the focus here, as we're saying, is on experience, on applied knowledge. But even more important is the ability to be able to take business requirements, business strategy, translate that into technical applications, technical protocols, technical, et cetera, and backwards, so that we can understand what the application of specific technology is going to do in the direction of a company. So it has a whole other set of skills that we're looking at, where I think while the CCIE and the CCD are very valuable as well, their focus is a lot narrower on design of a network, on troubleshooting of a network, where your level of understanding is more specific onto how the protocol operates, how the protocol is going to scale, for example. Where here now we're combining the whole thing on what is going to be the impact of that design into the business of the company that you're doing this for. What is going to be the operational impact, what is going to be the deployment, the cost, et cetera, everything else. So it is a lot more complex, as everyone I think should expect, because it's a higher level certification. And it combines both sides. So it's not just a technical certification like the other ones. It's more of that combination of business and technology.
So I take these certification exam. I take CCIE. I consider that as a bachelor's degree that I could learn. I had to go through classes and I had to understand. CCDE, I took that as a master's thing. That again, there's a lot of experience that is needed, but there is a lot of learning that you can do as well. CCA, I took that as a PhD work somebody's doing. You identify a problem, which you might have no idea in your PhD thesis work. Over here, luckily, you have to have the experience. So the educational experience you get on the academics, and then you can go do your PhD. Very similar here. I had the academic experience of CCIE and CCDE, but I had to have the real life experience. Without that, I could not have been able to pass this architecture exam. So, and again, you have to come up with a complete solution that you have to sit down and write, and then present it to a board. So I would take this as a 3-tier approach, and 2 require a lot of academic DE requires academic and some experience. Architecture requires purely experience on the industry side and your strong academic background. So that's how I compare the three.
What have each of you gained professionally and personally by going through this process, through the Cisco Certified Architect certification?
It's been a great experience. You know, even though 90%, 95% is similar to other involvements that we have, it has been a great experience because of what it means, right? Of the validation of going in front of the board, going in front of your peers, of really developing this relationship with this company that you know is the focus of the test, and being able to solve that problem. So definitely there's a lot of good experience, good learning. And to me, that's always been an important thing, being able to keep learning. So I see this not as the end, but you know, as the start of something else, where we can still keep doing more, keep learning a lot more.
So the experience was validation. It's real validation, representing to your peers. Some of the guys you work in day in and out, some you don't work with at all. I always enjoy talking to Russ White on so many protocol work. A lot of times we look at problem from a completely different angles, and presenting it to somebody like Russ and saying, here's how you would look at a problem, here's how I would look at a problem during a board exam was very, very interesting experience, saying you have to satisfy some of these top names in the industry who are sitting taking your board exam. Although you work with them in a very different environment in the customer setup, here are people that they have to be completely satisfied by the angle you're taking to solve the company issue that is given to you. And you should be able to satisfy those guys. So it was a very satisfying experience. And on the other hand, it was quite challenging to come up to the mark that's expected out of the people sitting in the room.
Is there any advice that you could give to prospective candidates for the Cisco Certified Architect certification?
Just come take the exam. You should have the background, the knowledge. If you're confident in that, just come take the exam. This is one of those exams, as we've been saying, that you just know. You have the experience, you have the knowledge, and you can come and you can do it. It's great that way. And it'll be a great learning opportunity for everyone.
Great. Khalid?
I totally agree with that. You cannot prepare for the 90% of the exam. 10%, yes, you can. For the 90%, you cannot prepare for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. You need experience. You need experience of working with customers, real-life problems, seeing what is out there in the industry, how industry is looking into the future, what industry is experiencing today, how you transition from today's problems and keeping the future in mind. So for that, you really, really have to have depth of knowledge and experience. Without that, good luck.
Well, in closing, I want to thank both of you again for being here and providing your thoughts and perspective on this awesome certification that we've developed here. And thank you to the audience for listening, and hopefully we'll provide some good thought and perspective on the certification process for this new certification. Thank you.